long on the push bike, honey, when I noticed you riding downtown in a hurry, honey.
I went to get a haircut and came back with a vintage bike. Hello, day 2 of our Speedwell bike restoration. You might remember we just had some issues loosening off some of these parts, but we've managed to sort that out. I am of two minds of what to do about in terms of stripping. I've used bead blasting before, I've used wire wheel before, and I've used paint stripper before. I think that wire wheel is very satisfying and very fast. Okay, a bit of an update. We've been cleaning up some of the chrome parts, little bits and bobs. My son, 13-year-old son's been having a nice time pulling bits apart and with the wire wheel. As I said earlier, I was going to use paint stripper, but it's been an abysmal failure. I don't know, it's a new tin, very disappointed with the results, so went back to good old wire wheel. And I know it's a bit messy, I do it outside, I don't do it even in the shed. I found it really, really effective on the end of my drill. Just simply going to move on to the main frame now, and hopefully very time consuming. We'll see how we go, but I'll show you the effects of about 2 hours of paint stripper. Virtually nothing. I don't know. Anyway. Okay, frames have been stripped wire wheel to the best that I can. Took a couple of hours, and I'm just starting to apply just a primer, metal primer out of a rattle can. Yeah, it came up quite well actually. So 2 hours later, we've given 2 coats of prime, and we're about to put on the first enamel top coat. I've taped off with just some blue masking tape the areas which will be red. I mean, I could probably spray over the blue, but it was only a 2-minute job to do that. So let's see how we go after the first coat on. Tried to do it fairly light. The paint was a little bit thinner than I thought, so I've got a couple of runs, but I'm going to do this really slowly, so I'm going to wait for a few days, give it a light sand. I should have said I gave the primer a light sand with an 800 grit, I think it was, and just a wipe over just to get rid of a few little things, and I'll do the same with this between coats. But the trick is with enamel, of course, is to let it harden as much as you can. So this process could take as much as a week to really take effect. But I like the colour, and it's very similar to the original. Okay, time to have a look at the rims. Been really struggling as to what to do with them. Do I clean them up and paint them and keep them original? Do I replace them with modern rims where I can put a modern set of brakes on the bike? I just went into town and spoke to a very experienced person in a bike shop, and he suggested to keep it just as it is. He said the steel rims are quite rare, and this sort of hub here is in exceptional condition. It says it's made in West Germany. Right, I've been at it for quite a while now. I found a font on just in Word that is very, very similar to the Speedwell font that was originally. I know for a fact that the Speedwell logo was stencil painted, because it's very obvious when looking at the original. So this is as close as I can get. Could I get a sticker online? Yes, I know there's a company that does the stickers that I could just stick over, but I just wanted to keep it as original as possible. So with a very small scalpel, I've done my best to try and get the right size. So that's why we've got a couple of different sizes. And I measured the original from the photographs with a ruler when I took the photo, so I know it's as close as I can get. I'm really nervous about doing this because it's only just typical A4 paper, and I think something a bit thicker might work better. It's white, obviously, the spray paint, and I'm just going to have to mask everything up and use great caution, and I basically have one go at this. Let's see how we go. Right, so I've masked it up as best I can, being very careful to make sure that the little intricate parts of the letters are as close as possible touching the frame. I'd like to film this live, but I'm too nervous. So I'm just going to do a couple of swipes over and back. It doesn't have to be very thick, the paint. In fact, it was quite transparent, the original. And we'll let it dry, and then I'll show you the big reveal at some point later today. Okay, an hour or so later, I'm not that happy with it. There's a little bit of overspray. In looking at the original, the font's fine, the spacing's fine, it's just not sharp enough. So I think what I'm going to have to do is maybe do some manual touching up, or the next step, of course, is to send it to the sign writer man that I know, and he might be able to work a bit of magic. I'm sure he probably could have painted it himself, but I thought I'd try the stencil method, and to very mixed effect. Anyway, so wheels have been stripped back with a wire wool, wire brush, and then a bit of wire wool, and I've also sort of wire wooled the spokes. I've then sort of wrapped each the spokes individually with a piece of mask tape, not right into the center, that's why the towel's just covering the centerpiece, and just put on some primer and some gloss enamel red. Now, I know that the color of the original bike was not red wheels, but I don't know, I just wanted to, I like red wheels, simple as that. So it's actually been a couple of months since I've recorded anything. As I said, I took the frame to an elderly gentleman who I know, who is an old school sort of pinstriper, and I think he's done a wonderful job. It's probably a little bit, some parts are a little bit thicker than I thought, but it's really old school, like hand done, and he managed to somehow, I'm not happy with it, but this was my stuff up, the Speedwell sign, my poor spray painting attempts were pathetic, so he's managed to sort of put a shadow, I suppose, on that to try and correct that. I'm not really happy with that, but the rest of it is beautifully done. I've bought, actually, since last recorded anything, I've actually bought a couple of old bikes and sort of borrowing a few bits and bobs. I found an old an original wire basket, which I've sort of cleaned up and painted. I've purchased online a little second-hand ladies sort of seat, which is quite nice. And as I've said before, I've got all the parts in my little box, cleaned, polished, ready to go. So it's just a matter of putting them back together again. So these are the rims of the bike I'm doing up at the moment. I gave them to a friend of mine who is not only a brilliant tradie, but also is an ex-Olympic cyclist, and he knows everything about bikes. He managed to replace some of the damaged spokes. One of them he couldn't replace because he couldn't get the rear, one of the parts off of the back to put the spokes in. So it's not 100%, but considering what, as you've seen, what they were like before, they've come up really nice. I wondered whether I'd put the pins, the gum walls, or put white walls on them, and I don't know, it's fairly ornate already. I didn't think I necessarily needed to do that, and this bloke tended to agree with that. So they're just basic black tyres, as you can see, but they've been balanced as best you can, and I think they look bloody amazing. Okay, headsets on. Never having done this before, I was a little bit apprehensive. I thought it was going to be more complicated with little individual bearings and I don't know, but taking a photograph when you pull it apart always helps, which I had on my phone, and that came together in about 5 minutes. Very easy, great. Okay, so here we are. A few hours of frustrating work trying to do all the adjustments. As I said earlier, I'm pretty new to this, so it's all straightforward and I understand the principle, but just so many, and cotter pins, don't get me started. So a few little nicks and dings as I've sort of bumped things, so I'll go back around and touch up a few things on the way, but I'm really happy with it. The basket I found off another bike for an original 1950 sort of wire one, and I painted that up red just to match the other ones. And I think with the chain guard, looks absolutely gorgeous. I had a bit of an issue with the chain, still not 100% happy with what's happened there, but I think essentially we're done. So thanks for watching. I might have some other projects, as you can see here, at some point, but we'll see how we go.